Hello, I'm Milena Kalinowska, Director of Public Programs and Education here at the Hirshhorn Museum, and I have a pleasure to have here with me Vito Acconci, a distinguished artist, who is visiting the Hirshhorn on the occasion of his Meet the Artist lecture this evening, where he will be talking about his work as well as that of Ai Weiwei. Now, Vito, I have a couple of questions, if I may. You really started as a poet.
Yeah.
And you wrote on some occasions that really what you were doing with poetry is using a page, almost as a space for action. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing, the way I started a poem was, how do I move? How do I move from left margin to right margin? What makes me move from one page to the next page, etc. I mean, you have to follow words. So words were really the beginning. I mean, and that notion of using the page as a space made me, after a few years, think, if I'm so interested in movement, why am I limiting this movement to an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper? You know, there's a floor out there. There's a world out there. So the whole thing started. I mean, my stuff has always been based on writing. I'm not necessarily happy with that, but I think the thing I use best is play with words.
Why wouldn't you be happy with it? Why wouldn't you be happy with it?
Because there are so many other kinds of ways to know things. You know, there's sound, there's vision. Sound is much more important to me than vision. Mm-hmm. I mean, visual things don't interest me so much because you have to be in front of something, whereas with sound, you're in the middle of something. And being in a space, being in the middle of something, is for me the goal. You know? And also, you know, I mean, I didn't want to interrupt when you said, you know, I haven't thought of myself as an artist since the 80s.
You haven't.
No.
But
I'm interested in people's space. Yeah. That's why I'm interested in design and architecture. I want spaces to be used.
So how did you make the jump from writing and using page as an action and into the gallery space? What was the idea? How did you come to the gallery? You wrote, I think, that it was during the 80s, or much earlier, probably.
Much earlier, 70s.
Right, that you
70s.
That you discovered
galleries
the
in New York were more, not discovered, I knew the space. I hadn't used the space, but in the beginning of the 70s, when galleries were moving to Soho, and there were very established galleries, and Ileana Sonnabend, for example, who I showed with from '72, said that, and I think she was being very, very, very honest about this. She said she really knew abstract expressionist art, and she knew even more pop art, but she had no idea what was the art of today. So she,
invited you?
No, she didn't invite me. She invited these two photographers, actually relatively famous photographers. They did the kind of, you know, mysterious photo of Franz Klein. Was it Franz Klein? No. Who was jumping out the window?
Yves Klein.
Yves Klein, yeah. And she asked them, their names were Harry Schunk, and the other person's names were Kender, but last name was Kender. They were doing photographs for Avalanche magazine at the time, among other magazines. And Avalanche was a kind of, you know, not an established art magazine. They made a point of having the artist's face, I hate the word artist, I prefer the word art doer. Anyway, the art doer's face on the cover, because this was going to be the words of the art doer. Mm-hmm. There wasn't going to be the art doer seen through a critic, seen through a curator. And she asked them, give me a list of, you know, the 25 best artists under 30. Mm-hmm. And I was on the list. In fact, well, she said I was first, but maybe she said that to everybody. You know, you can't tell. You know,
So what was your first exhibition? What was the first work that you created for a gallery?
Well, I had done stuff for galleries before. I did a gallery show at John Gibson's in '71, where one of the well, though some of the pieces were done not in the gallery, but there was one piece in the gallery where there was a wooden box about 3 feet high, 4 feet, 5 feet wide, and inside the wooden box was a cat, so that when people went into the gallery, I think I really wanted John Gibson to be bothered by the constant meowing of the cat. So I don't know if he took the cat out, but I wanted this to be could viewers trust, could viewers trust that maybe I was feeding the cat every night. Or did they think, I was...
Did the same thing in the museum? For example, when you had an exhibition at Museum of Modern Art, that was another kind of a situation for you after you showed in the gallery. So what happened there?
Yeah, it was a show. It was a show called Information. So it was a show where, probably in the United States, was the first show that tried to deal with so-called conceptual art. No, it wasn't just conceptual people. There was as you went into the show, there was a large in large writing, not handwriting, in large writing on the wall, an Andy Warhol statement that said, "In the future, everybody will be famous for 15 minutes." Yeah. And that was probably the whole thing about conceptual art. The thing about conceptual art is that it was probably a terror for galleries, because you didn't have to be in New York to show conceptual art. At that point, Nova Scotia College of Art and Design became the most famous art school, because you didn't need to be in an art center, because it was conceptual. It gave students a lot of excuses, though. They would say things like, "Well, this is what I did. I know you don't see anything, but it's conceptual."
So the jump from...
But what I did was I arranged, museum shows are longer than gallery shows. So for approximately 3 months, I arranged that my mail be forwarded by the post office to the museum. So my space in the museum was my mailbox. So anytime I wanted mail, needed mail, I would go up to the museum to get it. But it started a lot of things for me, because I started to think, wow, my mail, supposedly private thing, could very easily be stolen. So it started me thinking of the notion of making one's private self possibly public, possibly up for grabs. So it was a kind of beginning.
And then the transition from that situation, from the museum and galleries, to a public space, when you started to do works.
Yeah, because
so it was sort of natural.
I don't know if it was natural, but for me, it was. I started to think. Maybe not in the beginning. I started showing at Sonnabend in 1972. By '76, I was doing installations, so-called installations. Art has an amazing number of totally meaningless words. There's nothing in the world that isn't installed. A table is installed, a carpet is installed. And that's what made me think, this is one of the stupidest fields I could ever imagine. Anything can be brought into art, but the whole purpose is to sell it. In some ways it was great showing with Liliana Sonnabend, but after a few years, there would be a lot of calls saying we need something to sell. The installations were something to sell, but nobody really believed those were sellable.
So this wasn't something that you were interested in. So how did you? So then you started to move into the world of architecture.
Well, but the reason was I said, I think I'm in the wrong field. If you do stuff in art, there were do not touch signs, whereas in the street there aren't do not touch signs. So I thought, if I really want a public space, it can't be a space where you can't touch. So that's when I started to think I need eventually to get to public space, but it took a while. I mean, I did a number of pieces where I was trying to kind of practice for public space.
For example.
For example, I want to think, what could people do if they weren't being stopped? So in 1981, and it was when the kitchen in New York was having kind of exhibitions, but it was also in the Venice Biennale that year. Did a piece called Instant House, 4 panels, American flags, like 5 feet by 8 feet, a swing in the middle. So if a person sat in the swing went down, and these panels rise up around the person, making a kind of instant house. So now the U.S. flags are inside, and the Soviet flags are outside. It meant more in 1980 than now. And it just so happened that it was done right after the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. So there was a lot of outcry in New York. I didn't know that was going to happen, but it was kind of a lucky coincidence.
This interest in politics that continues in your work, how do you introduce it now?
I don't know if I do as much, or it's not as it's not as overt. Though a lot of people were against that piece. I mean, people who were very political people. They said that you're making, but there were people who had a kind of nostalgia for the beginning of the Soviet Union. So they would say that you can't equivalate the Soviet Union and the United States. They were mostly Europeans. I still think of my work as political, though I don't know. I don't know if I really want to use political signs. What I really want projects to do, and I think they only can do this if the worst thing about architecture is that it doesn't necessarily change, and as long as architecture doesn't change, I think it becomes a force that holds people down. That I think a really public space would be a space that could change with almost every I don't want to say viewer anymore. I think of people as users, and I don't know how that can really happen.
Well, you tried to do it with some of your
digitally.
pieces. You tried to do it with some of your pieces. For example, if I recollect the piece in Munich, when you created a piece on a square which actually moved, according to another piece which you installed on the roof.
Well, what was installed on the roof was a wind turbine, and the wind turbine produced electricity under this circular ring in the courtyard, and the circular ring had it was part of the garden. So a tree was on the circular ring, a bench was on the circular ring. So it was activated, but it wasn't activated by people. It was activated by wind power. So
And you
again,
want activation by, well, you
I
said to
think
me
it's
as we walk,
important for people to know, wow, I'm doing something. You know?
why is that? Why do you want them to feel that?
Because I want people to be empowered. I want people to be more important than the space. I want people to be certainly more important in galleries, certainly more important than buildings, you know. So that's why I say, I think my stuff is really political because I think it's about some kind of, I don't like to use the word people. People put persons into a mass. Persons are about, you know, when you use the word persons, it could be hundreds, thousands of individual people, each disagreeing with each other. Whereas the people, when you use the word people, the illusion is, oh, we all agree. Of course we don't, and we shouldn't. Because if we all agree, we would all be the same.
Is that something that maybe there is a similarity between you and Ai Weiwei? Of course, you are here on the occasion to also talk about him. Is that the connection?
I'm not sure what the connection is, because I mean the amazing thing to me about Ai Weiwei is, you know, he really does want to think of his stuff now as art, even though he had this period of architecture, where, you know, in a very short period of barely 7 or 8 years, he actually built much more architecture than I did in over 20 years. You know, but I mean, they were all in China. But he's very concerned that, you know, that when he uses furniture in, I don't know if he calls them sculpture, but I know he doesn't call them architecture. They're not furniture anymore. You can't use them. And I feel totally the opposite. I want things to be used, because only when a person becomes a user, a manipulator, only then can maybe each person have the chance of possibly changing something. You know? I still think, you know, I don't like the word art.
Well, you told me that. Yeah. Why not? Because at some point you wrote that the artists are kind of gadflies, because they have lots of possibilities. They can go really into any area and use anything. So in a way, they escape categories. So there was a point.
But you don't put the word art, because in common language, when we want to approve something that isn't even art, you can say, "Oh, it's just like a work of art." So that's a horrible mistake. You know, and I think the word art, if a person uses the word art because they use art as a sign of approval, that the artist may be already approved, just because it's in an art place. Whereas if a whatever usable space, inhabitable space is in the middle of a city, a person might stop thinking that they might not know what it is, but at the same time, if they can sit down, you know, people get tired fast. So they put themselves in the middle of a place, and then maybe that's the beginning of can I change the way traffic works in the city? You know, can I
change thinking?
Yeah.
But you said also that the artists in our society are marginal, but that marginality could be used to the advantage, and of course this is...
Well, it can be used for the advantage, because, though I don't know if that's true anymore.
Yeah.
Artists, you know, a lot of art doers make much too much money now to be marginal. You know, so they are marginal. They're a very important part of the economy.
Nowadays.
The economy, I think.
You said that you still use writing in your work.
Well, not so much writing. I mean, okay, I work as part of a studio of people. Small studio.
Tell us about the studio.
Nothing like Ai Weiwei. Well, right now the studio is non-existent because we're totally moneyless. But I'm assuming it will in some way start again. But you know, I don't have a studio of people. I mean, I know how I weigh waste. You know, they're workers. You know, he has an idea, they carry it out. Though I think he gives them a lot of leeway, but I'm not really sure about that. Because sometimes he says he does, sometimes he says he doesn't, so I'm not sure.
Your studio is about conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I start a project off with, well, for example, you know, this is a project we've been asked to do and the project is supposed to result in a museum. When we've seen the site, the museum is on flat land, but next to the flat land there's a slope, and the slope goes down to water. So let's start this project by thinking this slope is too hard to resist. It's like the call of the wild. You know? The museum is supposed to be on flat land, but it can't resist the slope. So it starts to go down the slope. You know? As it goes down the slope, there's a bridge, so it goes under a bridge. There's a railroad track, so why don't we go over the railroad track? Also, it's in a place in Russia that was relatively difficult to get to, so maybe the museum can double as a train station. Yeah. Now it can go down to the water. If it's down to the water, can it be released into the water? So and what I want is for people to have different ideas about this, you know. And maybe if these ideas start to collide, then maybe eventually we can get to a good idea. Because a good idea, I mean, what I don't want is an idea that one person has, you know. And that's why I think as soon as I started doing, well, also, I mean, another reason that I want to, but also need to work with people, is that there is a kind of necessity because there's nothing I really know how to do except play with words. So I might as well play with words. But I like the idea of being in the middle of things, you know. I want new methods to be used. I think it's important in this time to use computer scripting, even though I don't really know computer scripting, but I've been in the middle of it, so I kind of know. In fact, I've been told by one person in the studio that, you know, you kind of think like a computer, so you don't need to use a computer. But and I know what that person meant, because nothing comes from self-expression for me. I hate the idea of self-expression. That's why it always bothered me that when Ai Weiwei came to the United States, the one person you seem to see is Allen Ginsberg. You know, and I thought this is the total opposite kind of poetry that I would ever want to be involved in. I mean, I knew it, sure, you know, but the kind of personal rant is I don't think art or architecture should be about person. It should be about the possibility of other people.